Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode V-Chain, big episode number 22 of Barstool Bitcoin. Say hello to producer Kraser up there in Montreal, Canada.
Hello there, boys and girls. It's a little bit friggin' cold in Montreal, Canada, but happy to be back on the pod after 1 week off. Missed all my listeners and missed Chirpin' Dan the most. So I hope he told you that last week I won a prediction. And you know what? He didn't even have the balls to make a prediction because last week I wasn't there. So Dan, bring it on for this week, and excited to see what's in the news.
Yeah. So we'll start up with the predictions here. Bitcoin sitting on CoinMarketCap at 42.74 right now. I'll go first. You're right. I didn't make a prediction last week, but this week I will make a prediction. I'm gonna say we're gonna bounce back down to support levels. I'm gonna take the under and say it's gonna go under 4,200 next week.
All right, Dan. So you take the under. I'm going to stick with the even. I don't think it's really going to budge too much. I think it's going to stay where it is. And yeah, that's my prediction. So we'll have to see next week who is right or wrong. Just wanted to let you listeners know that we have a great interview today as well too. We have Angelo Dodaro, who is the co-founder of AdBank, which trades at the symbol ABD. So stay tuned at the end and hop on for that awesome interview. But Dan, let's before we do that, let's hop into some news stories. What's been happening in the world of crypto?
Yeah, definitely. Before we get into that, just for all you traders, you guys love the analysis here. Bitcoin looks ready to dump from here into the daily breaker. The previous swing high could get ran, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I think the downside into the targeted daily level is coming. I'm staying patient here. We're not in any positions. Monitoring for a daily close above or below 42.25, which is the bearish order block equilibrium. And we'll see where it goes from there. But again, I'm taking the under for next week, boys. Now, other people, are a little more optimistic than I feel right now. Block Show just wrapped up in Singapore, and it closed on a pretty optimistic note. We had a lot of people throwing out good predictions for 2019 when it comes to crypto. There was more than 50 speakers over there, and some notable ones was Jeffrey Huang, who said in 3 to 6 months the growth will be exploding. It's cool to be in this new technology, new space where it's really quiet and nobody is in on the secret yet. And then we had Tom Lee, who's like a major crypto bull from Wall Street. He took the same view, saying that the bear market's a golden time to invest in crypto. He said the only time the return is better than 7% is when you buy at a bear market. Bitcoin may have downsides in the near term, but this doesn't change the fact that we're still in the earliest days of crypto and it's about to become an emerging asset class. I would second that, Big Tom. And then we also had Bobby Lee, who's the co-founder of the oldest crypto exchange in China and mining pool, BTCC. And he said, especially in this bear market, I urge you, if you're a true believer, if you truly understand the essence of Bitcoin, the impact of Bitcoin, about this new form of ownership, about the control we're taking back, about the freedom of money, you should hold your Bitcoin. And I believe he is right there. And then we also had Mike Novogratz, who didn't debut this at Block Show, but he's the founder of Galaxy Digital. He's pretty notorious, and they just published their Q3 earnings, and their portfolio had dropped like more than 100 million. But he is still bullish. He's Mike Novogratz is ex-Goldman Sachs partner. He said that he expects cryptocurrency to flip next year in 2019, and said that this year has been really challenging. But I think it will flip. I don't think it's going to flip as high as most people think it will. Like, we probably won't see record highs for a little while here, but we are in a great condition of the market to accumulate right now, and all of these positive picks is good to know that people are sticking with their overall predictions. although you know, because of this flash crash and Bitcoin testing support levels, we have seen a huge sell-off of mining devices, and also because of the halving that's coming up. So we had like the biggest sell-off in mining devices in China that's ever happened. They're selling it by the kilo with the market decline. I mean, they're selling the machines by weight, which is crazy. Like
Yo,
as opposed to price per unit, right?
yo, that sounds like a fucking drug deal, bro. It's by kilos. Come on.
Yeah, they're selling it
That's
by
pretty
kilo.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean
Well,
the decline in mining profitability is it makes sense, and also with the halving coming up, miners are going to get less benefit. They're going to make less Bitcoin, so it created a lot of panic when it comes to the miners. But overall, I'm not too worried about this little flash crash here. I think it's actually healthy for the currency. And finally, we're getting some volatility. And in our trading group, we've been profiting off that volatility. And it's always good to get some volatility when you've seen such a stable market for the last couple months.
yeah, that's good to hear. Do you think the miners, the sell-off is just reactionary, or they're just doing it because they see in the future that maybe they're not going to be as profitable? What do you think?
It's a bit of both. Like it's preparing for the future. Some people it actually put their lights out. Probably this decline in Bitcoin price. It really depends on how much they're paying for power, you know. So and at what scale they're doing it at. So there's a bunch of different conditions that created this sell off, I think. And then
Mm,
I also the fact that since some people were doing it, others probably just jump ship too with them because they figure, they know that the halving is coming up. But
mm.
Bitcoin pretty much bottomed out at 3K. It was trading on BitMEX in 3600 at one point.
Wow, is that the lowest it's been in quite some time, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's the lowest it's been in a real long time. I mean, before the last market pump, before the record highs, it was below 3,000, but since 20,000, this is the lowest we've seen in a while.
So do you think now would be a good time to kind of get in, especially with those predictions in 2019? You don't want to be left behind before you can get it in at a better price, eh?
Yeah, I think it's a good time. I think we haven't found the bottom yet, though, so I think there will be potentially a better time, but it's a good time to
Hmm.
start building your position. And a lot of people are saying that we're not going to find the floor until we hit that 3K flat level, and I think that's possible. I think that we will see 3K even hit in this market, and that would be a really good time. But you don't want to try and time the bottom. That's pretty
Yeah,
risky.
yeah.
You should start aggregating your position.
Yeah, because ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you do not want to miss this boat because when it starts sailing, it's gonna go. So don't
Yeah,
miss it.
it's going, and the scarcity that Bitcoin has is just so immense. People do not realize it. Like Charlie Lee said, people are they. This is such an early development. This is like being involved in the internet in the year 2000. The bubble just popped, everything crashed. Now, the companies with real value that actually have real businesses will rise to the top. The rest will be pushed out, and we will see a new record high for Bitcoin in the coming months. Um, and we also have other tokens that will come about that will carve into the total market cap. Although I do believe that Bitcoin will eventually have over 80% market capitalization. But we have other companies, like we have this new oil trading blockchain platform, VACT, VAKT, and they just launched with Shell and BP as their first users, and they use JP Morgan's blockchain technology to run. So there's going to be some big companies like that can use blockchain with their existing systems to create to create really huge companies that expand and really develop the market that they're already in.
That's really interesting. Now, I know you mentioned those two companies. This is the oil company. So are you going to be telling me that I could maybe pay at the pump with my Bitcoin for those companies, or?
No, I don't think that's what they're doing. They're using the blockchain tool for, I believe, for their supply chain, but they haven't
Okay.
had many announcements of the rollout yet. So they all they really said was that they aim to expand from oil to all physically traded energy commodities. So we'll see
So
how they use it.
basically, stay tuned and keep your eyes peeled for more coming in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last thing we got before we kick things over to the interview is we talked on another episode about the SEC charging DJ Khaled and Floyd Mayweather, of course, and they uh, they they charged them for unlawfully advertising ICOs. And in the announcement, the SEC found that Mayweather did not disclose promotional payments from three ICO issuers, including 100 grand from Centratech, and Khaled failed to disclose 50 grand from that same company. And back in May, the three co-founders of Centra, they were indicted for running a fraudulent ICO, which raised 32 million. So
Holy shit.
I
That's a
mean,
lot of money.
yeah, Mayweather agreed to collaborate with the investigation and not promote any kind of securities during the next couple of years. But Khaled has also been barred from securities promotion for 2 years. And you know, the SEC is pretty strict when it comes to that. They commented saying investors should be skeptical of investment advice posted to social media platforms and should not make decisions based on celebrity endorsements. Social media influencers are often paid promoters, not investment professionals, in the securities they're touting, regardless of whether they're issued using traditional certificates or on the blockchain, could be frauds. And I mean, who's a bigger example of this than Donald Trump? You know, his name
Yeah, I
is
was,
everywhere,
yo,
and
this
he's the
guy,
president of the US. So, I mean, it's tough not to make decisions based on celebrity endorsements, but the fact of the matter is, these guys are just licensing their name to a company. Like, they don't endorse the product, they don't use the product themselves. So, you can't take things at face value.
yeah, I agree with you. And I think the day and age that we live in now, and especially with the millennial generation coming up, social media is a huge influence, right? A huge platform. And like you said, you have Donald Trump as a perfect example. It's almost like a popularity contest. So you see, oh, there's big bad Floyd. If Floyd's doing it, then it must be okay. But really, you need to do your fucking research and not just base it on that, right? And if you guys want to know a little bit more about Floyd, I also think he had a few little tax problems back in the day too. So this is not the first time he's had a little run-in when it comes to SEC or money. So just keep
Yeah.
that in mind too.
Yeah, Floyd's had some run-ins with the IRS for sure, but I think it'll all get resolved. This is still the Wild West. This is only more proof positive that we're super early on crypto and everything is developing, but you have to be that is important because you have to be aware that there's so many scams because we are so early in the history of this technology. So anyways, boys, let's kick it over to the interview now and enjoy that. We had the founder of AdBank on, and they are, I think they're top 1,000 for sure in total market cap coins. I think they're top 800 or in that range. But it was a great interview, and Angelo has been involved in different businesses previous to this. He's been responsible for raising a ton of money in the space, and it was just a good overall interview. So enjoy that, boys, and we'll see you next week. Yo, boys, hang on for 1 second. I just want to talk to you guys about Synnit.com. If you haven't heard of it, want to check it out at synnit.com. There's trading signals on sale from now until December 25th. The signals are incredible. The group's 97% accurate right now across all their signals. Synod.com, they help you understand how to look at Bitcoin, do analysis, and of course gives you ready to go copy and paste signals you enter in your BitMEX or Deribit account. I'm sure we all get different signals for Bitcoin and alts, but Synod.com cuts through the confusion and gives you just the information you need. No fluff, no filler, just cold, hard, unemotional analysis and margin trade signals so that you can profit in any market. You just go to synnit.com, you get a lifetime account, you check out and fill out the form on there, and then they get back to you with your account details. Then you get profitable real-time human signals, which are always good to have in your pocket. I can't recommend them enough. Again, so now through December 25th, you're going to get 50% off a lifetime membership when you subscribe at synnit.com and use the code BARSTOOL at checkout to get 50% off. That's synnit.com. We are live. Welcome, everyone. We have Angelo Dodaro as a guest on Barstool Bitcoin today. Angelo is the co-founder and chief marketing officer at AdBank, which is a powerful ad platform built on Ethereum. He's also the Canadian representative and on the board of directors for the International Decentralized Association of Cryptocurrency and Blockchain, and is an advisor and consultant for several blockchain startups, including Celsius Network, Well, and Howdo. His contributions have led to over $70 million in ICO funding in 2018 alone, and we are very happy to have Angelo on the show today. Where are you calling in from, Angelo?
Just outside Toronto in Canada.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show today. Like I said, we're very happy to have you. I'm sure you gained a wealth of insight raising all that funding over the last 3 quarters of 2018. What can you tell us is happening with the ICO world right now?
It's definitely a very quickly evolving space, and I think anybody that gets into launching their own ICO will realize that things can look very differently within a 3-month period, which makes it very difficult to plan for things. So, I think what I would generally say to anybody that's kind of in the space is you can't really afford to take your time, and moving quickly is so important. And I think now is probably just as true as it's always been, but we're definitely seeing things like a move more towards private sales. You're not seeing like the big, loud public sales anymore. I would say the best projects for the most part, what I'm seeing are sold out before anybody's ever heard of them. And so they're largely held to like funds or family offices. Pools are struggling. If anybody is familiar with kind of like the pools that exist out there, where it's not like a fund in the sense where it's one group backing a project. It's like a lot of people putting in little amounts and buying tokens or whatever the case may be. And those probably are a lot less popular than they used to be. So overall, lots of change. And, I'm sure by next month will be a lot different than it is this month. And, 3 months from now, maybe totally unrecognizable.
Yeah, well, I just read recently that the funding in the month of October for ICOs was 24% greater than the month of September, but the amount of ICOs that launched in October was the lowest of all of 2018. So seems to mirror your statement that most of the good ICOs, or most in general, are all doing private sales only. Yeah, for sure. And, it's hard to blame them in the sense that doing a public sale is pretty risky in a lot of ways, where,
you're kind of depending on getting a certain amount in a certain period of time, and when it's done, you got to shut the gate. And people are pushing their sales a lot more these days. So committing to a really aggressive time frame is not as effective as it used to be, at least, this time last year. But, it's just all part of the game. It's cycles.
Right. Yeah. And the market is developing so quick. I mean, things are going to keep changing, like you said, month to month. Now, what is AdBank? Like, you guys already locked up your ICO, you closed it. So can you tell us a little bit about what is AdBank, what problems does it solve, and what is the utility of the token?
For sure, yeah. So AdBank exists because there's three major problems in advertising. And the first one is there's a huge lack of transparency. There's a lot of different middlemen that kind of exist in the ecosystem, in the digital advertising ecosystem. If you're familiar with the problems in supply chain and how blockchain's a really good fit for that world, digital advertising is more or less a supply chain play, just in a digital ecosystem instead of boxes traveling from one point to another. And so the other major issue in digital advertising would be fraud. So there's about $51 million a day that advertisers lose to fraud. And it's such a big problem that it's actually the second most profitable form of income for organized crime after drugs.
Wow.
So it's big business. Yeah, ad fraud is a huge, huge business, and people have probably heard of things like click farms, or click farms is the most common one. Bot fraud is another term that's used, invalid traffic. But there's so many different ways that fraud is actually committed in the advertising ecosystem, and it's a very complex problem. But solving it, or even just solving a portion of it, could be a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. So blockchain has some really great use cases for solving fraud, and that's something that we're particularly interested in. But the last problem of the digital advertising world is I kind of mentioned in the first issue with the transparency, is the middlemen. And they're taking on average half of every dollar. And in some cases, they're taking substantially more than that. And in some cases, not actually showing what they're taking when they're sharing the revenue with the publisher, which is essentially what the business is. If you're a publisher and you're monetizing your website by putting ads on it, you should have some transparency on how that inventory is being sold. And the reality is there's a lot of ad tech middlemen out there that don't provide any transparency, and they're making all the money off of these publishers. So it's a messy industry in that sense. There's a lot to do, a lot to fix. So, our vision is pretty broad. But one of the things that we're most excited about, I would say, is fraud. Excited in the sense that we think that blockchain is a really good solution to the digital fraud issue. And so the use case of the token is really tightly linked to that, in the sense that the issue with having a traditional digital advertising ecosystem is, well, actually, if we back up and talk about just fighting fraud in general and tracing fraud, anybody that works in the business of fighting fraud, whether it's detective or advertising, they'll all tell you that you have to get really good at following the money. And it's really tough to follow the money with fiat-based systems, because you don't have access to bank account statements, you don't have access to credit card statements. The access to data is pretty limited in terms of the transactional information. And so that limits your ability to actually detect different types of fraud. So there are types that you can detect without having that data, but having it opens up the possibilities in a way that has not been available ever in the digital advertising world. So in our case, we want to use the token to essentially reduce the signal to noise ratio of advertising transactions against non-advertising transactions. And, fiat, if we think about that, it's used for literally everything. If we think about Bitcoin and Ether, those cryptocurrencies are being used for many other transactions as well. So if we talk about using AI to fight fraud, when the AI has to first sort through, is this an advertising transaction or is this not an advertising transaction? It has quite a big job before it's actually getting to its real job of, is this human traffic or is this non-human traffic? And so having a new token for that purpose is incredibly important to operating that at scale, because digital advertising is pretty robust in its demands, and there's a lot going on in that ecosystem. So, having that separation of its own data set, if you will, to sort out those transactional data helps to detect the different patterns in a much more scalable way.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to unpack all of that in just a moment, but if we could back up here, how did you first get introduced to cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, or what's the story behind you getting into the blockchain industry?
Yeah, so I'm a marketer, and that's really my background, but I'm also a really obsessive cryptocurrency. I do some trading, but I'm just into the space, kind of from every angle. And to give you kind of a little bit more history behind that, I think it was about 4 years ago, my partner and I, who's also a partner at AdBank, Kelsey, we had a digital marketing agency called Multivitamin Media. And when that first started up, one of the first projects we worked on was launching a lot of the social media accounts and just the presence for the Extreme Tech Challenge, which was started by Richard Branson and Bill Tai. Bill Tai, obviously you know who Richard Branson is. Yeah. Bill Tai is a huge player in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency space. I think he's the first guy that tweeted about Bitcoin. So he's a great guy, super nice, amazing human being. And he was the first one to tell us about cryptocurrency. And I remember, I think it was 4 years ago, trying to buy Bitcoin. And as a Canadian, it was like a nightmare, and it still is a nightmare. And I actually didn't do it at that time. It took me substantially longer before I became comfortable, because the exchanges, and there wasn't a Coinbase option for Canadians back then. I don't even know if Coinbase was around back then. But the exchange that I have to use in Canada is a lot more crude. And nobody that I know had ever used any exchange in Canada. So it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to send this wire transfer to Georgia or wherever it went to, and just take the gamble. And ever since then, I've just been totally obsessed. And actually in the beginning, I didn't fully understand what made it special, which is why I kind of just gave up. Once I figured out and realized why blockchain was this really special thing that had the power to change so many things that were broken in the world, was when I was like, screw it, I'm taking the chance, because I just believe in this so much.
Yeah, so 4 years ago, and then what was the progression from there to getting involved with AdBank? Were you part of the inception of that, or how did that go?
So I wasn't part of the inception of it. I was brought in after the ideation, and some work had been done, like in terms of formulating, what the technology would be, and some of the nuts and bolts of how that was going to work. So that was between John, the CEO, founder, and Kyron, who was kind of like the original inventor of a lot of the technology, or at least the early foundation of it. And I was like one of those annoying guys that was always talking about crypto and Bitcoin, like I still am. And I won't get into the long story, but basically John, the CEO founder, randomly ended up at my office because we were about to rent out our office and try to get out of our lease, moving to a new one. And he was looking at it, and I think like within a couple minutes, he established that he wasn't interested in the space, but we got talking about cryptocurrency, and he basically was like, I want to talk to you about this project. And so I think a week or two later, we got on the phone. He told me about the idea, and I was like, you know what, I'm in. So the rest is kind of history in that sense. But that was about, I would say, maybe July last year. So they had already been working on it for some time by the time Kelsey and I had gotten the mix. But as soon as Kelsey and I got in the mix, like we, totally overhauled the brand. The name was already set, so we didn't come up with the name. But Kelsey and I created the brand, did the video, which I guess kind of went viral in a sense. It had about 700,000 views between Facebook and YouTube. The big one was Facebook for us, though. At the time, we were actually doing some Facebook advertising, and the campaign was like super successful, and people were really responding to the video because we made it very funny and just like quirky, and it had a lot of jokes in it because we got a Saturday Night Live writer to help us with the script, and so anyways, that was kind of the history of Kelsey and I getting into AdBank and kind of what our role became.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that video because I've seen it obviously, and I've heard quite a bit about it. I think you said 800,000 views across the two platforms, or 700,000.
I'm willing to commit to 700,000. It could be as high as 8. I just haven't checked the total on Facebook recently. In either case, that is by far the most viewed ICO video of all time, I think, that I've ever heard about. So what was that like, and how did that create exposure for the company? Did people not take it as seriously as you would have liked because it was more of a humorous video, or were there any downfalls, or was it just all real positive? Yeah, I'm a big believer in, if something isn't at least a little bit polarizing, it's probably not very good. And so I'm kind of a big believer in that fortune favors the bold. And so, there's a lot of people that are like, this is ridiculous, but I would say there was way more people that were like, this is, like hilarious. I love this. I've never seen anything like this. And my whole intention was to create something that people wanted to watch, because all ICO videos were so boring, like excruciatingly boring. And you'd watch and you'd be like, I still have no idea what they do by the end of it. So for us, like, I really wanted to simplify it so that, by the end of 2 minutes and 52 seconds, you didn't feel like you're an expert, but you at least knew enough about what we were doing to want to learn more and actually read the white paper. Like, as a marketer, I don't think that somebody should have to read your friggin' white paper to know if it's an interesting or viable project. That's the last step, and if people have to get to that point before they see potential in what you're doing, then you haven't done a very good job with your marketing. And so for us, like, I'm unshakably confident that blockchain and advertising are a match made in heaven because of the issues in advertising and because of the features of blockchain. And so communicating that in a really simple way was key. And yeah, I don't think that there was any negatives in the sense, because even when people were critical of the video, they were compelled to talk about it, which helped other people see it. And so that's the thing that people almost don't realize, is that if you really don't like something, talking about it is the last thing you should do. And more people were talking about it because they liked it, but even the ones that didn't like it were improving the rankings in like the Facebook algorithm. So more people were seeing it, showing up in more areas. And so it really, that was the intended effect, and that happened. And I was really, really happy to see that, because, you don't always get that. That's always the intention, but it doesn't always happen.
Right. So how quickly did that video lead to you guys filling up the ICO? Like, what was the timeline there?
I wouldn't, so it wasn't really like we put it out and everything just like fell into place. It was still a grind. We got a huge amount of traction early on, and then it started to kind of taper off. And then we had lined up a few things at once, between we had some great interviews, and we had a great campaign that went on CoinMarketCap, and everything just basically like exploded near the end. And we went from like, I want to say like 30% sold to 100% in like a few days. But we had been kind of just treading water, or more slow and steady, I would say, for a couple weeks. And it was just like everything kind of lit off at once. So it's kind of true when people say it takes a while to become an overnight success. It was months and months and months of laying the groundwork and, building the right assets and executing them with the right timing. And then kind of saving the big fire of the cannons for that perfect moment. And everything kind of came together, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, and the ICO was 15 million, is that correct?
15.
15, yeah, 15 million. 1.5.
1.5, yeah, that's right.
And what are you guys working on now behind the scenes at AdBank?
Yeah, so we have created an ad network that is servicing the crypto and blockchain space with some cool websites that are part of it. Some really cool ones coming out that we'll be announcing soon that are joining the network. We've also acquired an ad network and looking to potentially do another acquisition as well, just making sure that it kind of ticks all the right boxes. And really our big goal is to develop the technology that we're building and deploying it in these ad networks that we own and control that already have real customers on it. They're profitable, functioning ad networks with advertisers and publishers. So, this is a sandbox that we can play in and we create all the rules in, which is really exciting because, when you have emerging technology, you can develop it and you can do it in a lab environment, if you will. But eventually that needs to go out and actually be used to be perfected and actually become useful. And we don't have a lot of the barriers that other companies in our space do in that sense. So, developing on that and refining kind of the ideas in the white paper is really just kind of the MO right now. And something that was an interesting development that just came is that we had as an idea that we wanted to execute on, we just didn't see it being executed this quickly, was a browser plugin. So an ad blocker, essentially, compatible with Google Chrome, that will pay you AdBank tokens to essentially unblock ads on AdBank powered sites. Mm-hmm. So, that's something that's certainly something we've heard of before and seen in other areas, but with a lot of less of the barriers that come along with it.
Yeah, never on the blockchain. I've never seen that on the blockchain before.
Yeah, so we still have some more development to do on that. We have the browser plugin is functioning in terms of the ad blocking feature, but the tie-in of the tokens is what's next.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool. That's great. I mean, it sounds like you guys are making or starting to make a big splash in the crossover between advertising and blockchain. Didn't you have a hand in Austria kind of piloting a certain blockchain technology as well with that viral video?
Yeah. So the government of Austria, their tourism arm, the Austrian National Tourism Office, they saw our video and had been following the project for some time and reached out and said, hey, we love what you guys are doing. We'd really like a chance to try it out and learn more. And so we kind of started that relationship. Oh man, like I would say potentially end of 2017, early 2018. I can't even remember. It's been a while though that we've been talking to them. And at the time they had reached out, we were way too early on to even be able to entertain the request, but we're really excited about it. And they had some amazing people there that are really innovative, really smart on the advertising side, but also really knowledgeable on the blockchain side and follow that space and are very excited about that as well. So we did a pilot with ANTO, Austrian National Tourism Office, where they piloted our technology and did an ad campaign that was hosted on a Red Bull media owned site. So a lot of people don't know this, but Red Bull is actually quite a publishing mogul themselves. And they have their own publishing house called Red Bull Media House. And they have a bunch of different websites that they own. One of them actually is a really perfect fit for Austria because Austria's number one income, what am I trying to say here?
Household
industry.
Oh.
Austria's number one industry is tourism.
Oh.
So Red Bull had a site that was very much catering towards the outdoor mountain living called Bergwelten. Probably not saying that right, which was a perfect fit. And so they were really cool. We actually connected with them when we were in Austria because we were going to meet Anto in person. And Kelsey, she is pretty notoriously awesome when it comes to connecting with pretty much anybody on LinkedIn. Reached out to somebody from Red Bull because their headquarters are actually based in Austria, in Salzburg, where The Sound of Music is filmed. For anybody that's a Sound of Music nerd, I know there's quite a few of them out there. Kelsey is one. And so we went out to Salzburg and actually met a person at Red Bull at the Red Bull headquarters. Yes, I had a Red Bull at Red Bull, and it was delicious.
Epic.
And it was pretty cool. I still have the can, actually. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. So yeah, we did that, and the campaign was definitely a success. We're already talking about doing a second campaign. No official plans yet, but we would just have the discussions. And we've also did a campaign with AdWeek, who, for anybody that's not in the advertising industry, AdWeek is like the Bible of CMOs everywhere. And so that was really cool. They hosted a campaign for a company called Flixel. That's an Apple design award-winning software that's used by a lot of people in the advertising industry to create really dynamic creative. And so, there's some other companies that we're talking to about pilots as well. And I'd say that's probably one of our big priorities going forward into 2019 is getting real companies using the technology, getting feedback as we build on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for all of our listeners, well, to revert back here, for all of our listeners who don't know, ClickFarm and bot traffic is what's creating all this fraud in the advertising industry, and that's basically just bots, not real human people who are coming to websites, clicking on ads, and basically they are frauding big networks, big advertising networks for, the tune of 51 million a day, you said, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And what do you think is that going to be the biggest mark that you guys leave on the advertising industry? Is that preventing, limiting and preventing that much fraud from happening? Because that's actually mind blowing to think that, 51 million a day in ad fraud. I mean, it's the second most profitable source of income for organized crime, you said. I mean, that could potentially create a much better world just from limiting that problem.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's definitely a big thing. It's a huge problem though. So the reality is that fraud will never be 100% eliminated. But the goal would be to make it substantially less profitable, because right now it's just too easy to make money frauding advertising. And the good news is, though, is that leaves a lot of opportunity to solve these problems and bring money back to the budgets of advertisers and into the pockets of publishers. And so, to answer your question about do we see that being the biggest mark that AdBank makes? It could be, but to be honest, there's so much that can be done without even fraud in the mix that, excuse me, is very valuable to the ecosystem, that if we can even tackle 5% of the fraud problem, in addition to reducing, excessive cuts by middlemen, we're restoring a significant amount of money back into the ecosystem that is otherwise just being sucked up by the middle. And I think the whole philosophy of blockchain is there's too many bridge tolls where there needs to be custodians instead of collectors, meaning, yes, bridges need to be built. Yes, they cost money. Yes, people should contribute to those bridges. But, so I'm in Canada, right? I drove to New York recently, and I think I had to pay was it $30 to go over the bridge to New Jersey, one way there, one way back. It was 15 each or something, which to me was just insane, to think that it doesn't actually cost that much to operate that bridge. The amount of people that are taking that bridge every day, there's a lot of profit being sucked up in there, that if that bridge was something that was, democratized in a better way, which I think blockchain is really good at. I'm not saying that it would be less than $15 or so much less than $15, but it would be the more fair amount given the different stakeholders that are within that transaction, And yeah. I didn't do a great job of explaining that, but to me, I just think of it as the problem is there's so many stakeholders in the ecosystem that bring so much value. They bring almost all of the value, yet they see a very disproportionately less amount of that value in return. And right. I think blockchain is going to be a really good instrument to realign those benefits to the people that are actually pulling their weight more. It's more of a blockchain is a good meritocracy, right. And I think advertising, between all the different things that are wrong with it, there's so many problems to solve. So if we did, if we were able to reduce cuts by middlemen by half, and take and before we even started to do a meaningful amount on the ad fraud side, we're already contributing a lot to the digital advertising space, and those are really realistic goals.
Yeah, I think that could create a huge mark in both blockchain and in advertising. It'll bring a lot of exposure as well to blockchain and the actual use cases that it can solve, or the problems that it could solve. To kind of go away from AdBank for just a moment here, you have been involved in crypto for a number of years now, and we like to do a little prediction segment on our show. So what if you would indulge us, what would be your prediction for the price of Bitcoin in the short term and in the long term?
Oh man, I can't even make predictions anymore. I've been wrong too many times. But what I will say is that I do think that, so I have to be careful because I'm not a financial advisor, and because I'm part of a company that's has a token, mm-hmm. I don't want anything I say to be taken out of context. But what I would say is that we perhaps haven't reached that point where what we're seeing is a true reflection of the utility of what everything is supposed to be, in terms of how much of that volume is driven by true utility. I don't think that we're seeing enough that is driven by utility in the current state of the market now. And I think when we start to see more of the volume driven by utility, that would be a strong signal that blockchain and its purpose for bringing value into the different areas that it's deployed in our case in advertising, is going to have a more positive effect overall. Because right now there's too much, it's fanboyism, right, that's kind of dominated it in the last year. And I think like what we're seeing is that's not really sustainable, but the reality is enterprise level companies and even smaller companies are very excited for what blockchain is going to do. And as soon as blockchain technology is catching up to actually delivering on those promises, I think we'll see some really good effects from that. I don't know, and I won't say exactly what those are because I don't even know, but that's what I'm excited to see. And that's what our number one goal is with AdBank, is focusing on true utility and true volume based on utility. Because that's, in our case, that's what's going to develop the AI. The AI needs experience to get better, and it's only going to get experience if it has volume based on utility, meaning, tokens being used for ad campaigns. And that, I think, is something that we just need to see from every project. And even in the case of Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think there was a lot of Ethereum volume being driven by projects that were just raising funds in Ethereum. And it seemed like that was a more predominant use of Ethereum than what it's actually meant for, which is being essentially the world's most powerful cloud computer, if you will, and so I know that's kind of a non-answer, but at the same time, it's like, who really knows?
Yeah, that's okay. We get tons of predictions on the show. I think our listeners got the gist of what you're saying, and it's so needed to have tokens that actually have utility. I mean, so many of the tokens around out there were just used for, it's essentially crowdfunding. There's no real use case, and nobody's using those tokens now. So the cleanup of the industry will definitely happen over the coming years, and these tokens that actually have utility, that have real value, will rise to become the cream of the crop and be the ones that still stick around. That's my viewpoint. And I mean, with all the scams out there, it's refreshing to hear about new upcoming tokens driven by technology that have utility and that provide real world value to consumers and advertisers as well. Now, where can people go to learn more about AdBank and what you guys got going on? Is there a notifications list, or what's the website?
For sure. Yeah, you can go to adbank.network. And if you go all the way to the very, very bottom of the page in the footer, you'll get all the social links to Telegram, Medium, etc. And definitely join our email list, because we put, I would say, our most important updates out there. And our Medium is a good place to look at our most important updates, rather than like kind of Twitter, where you're always trying to put something out every day. If you want the meat and the potatoes, go to Medium, our Medium blog, which is medium.com/adbank-blog, or you can just go to adbank.network, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll see the links there. But yeah, otherwise our team is pretty accessible, whether it's on Telegram or Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'd love to connect with you.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on, Angelo. I'll leave a link to the website in the show notes section for our listeners here. And before we close things out, do you have any last words for our listeners?
I would just say this is probably the most exciting space I've ever been involved in, and I've worked in many different industries. And I have the utmost of faith that what's happening in this space will totally change the world forever in a really powerful way. And, today's, I don't know when this episode gets published, but right now it's the November the 14th. And sometimes on days like today, it can make people want to pull their hair out. But remember, zoom out at the bigger picture and just think about what we're actually doing here. It's so early in the stage of cryptocurrency and blockchain. The market cap of the entire crypto market is just over 180 billion right now. I'm in advertising. The entire digital advertising market is 230 billion as of last year, right? That's a really, really small number in retrospect. And so look at that as a huge growth opportunity for where we're going. And if you're listening to podcasts like Barstool Bitcoin, you'll be remembered as one of the smart people that knew early on.
Oh, well, thank you for that, Angelo. We did see a bit of a flash crash today on the 14th, but by the time our listeners hear this, we may have rebounded or we may have pushed further down. I think we're just collecting liquidity here, but we'll see. Anyways, thank you for coming on, Angelo. We really appreciate it, and thank you, fellas, for listening in to Barstool Bitcoin today. We'll see you next week.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks.